I think there are inescapable national security implications for this technology. There is a race for it. We're trying to get it. The Russians are trying to get it. The Chinese are trying to get it. Whoever gets it, they win, you know.
Are there some sort of reports about the Russians and the Chinese also having recovered crafts?
Dude, he smuggled a ton of classified documents out of Russia himself during glasnost and perestroika. He went and met with the heads of the UFO programs in Russia during that time period. He came back with all those documents and actually supplied them to some people. Like that happened.
It had a lot to do with Harry Reid's decision to go ahead and support funding because those documents show that the Russians are trying to do what we're trying to do, which is to take this stuff apart and figure out how it works.
And what year was this?
This is 1993, the first time I went. But their study lasted, they had the biggest study in the history of the world. From 78 to 88, the USSR sent out an order to every military unit in the vast Soviet Empire that any UFO, any orb, any ball of light, anything weird in the sky, all has to be investigated. And that information had to be funneled to the Ministry of Defense, to the desk of a guy named Colonel Boris Sokolov, who was in charge of this program. And I met him, and he shared a lot of that information with me. And he admitted, we're trying to figure this stuff out because if we could duplicate that technology, we could kick your ass in terms of stealth. We could beat you at your own game on stealth technology. So they were trying to do it. They're trying to figure it out. We hear bits and pieces that they have recovered crashes as well. So do the Chinese, maybe the Israelis.
I mean, also in these documents. And can you tell them who you gave them to, that whole stuff? Can you tell them that?
They got into the hands of the U.S. government. And then that was after I came back from Russia the first time. I went back again in 96. A lot of the people who had been willing to talk to me during glasnost were now afraid. They would not meet with me. The people who had gone on camera changed their tunes because the whole country had changed in that time period. But the documents also went to OSAP. That's the program that the DIA ran. Bigelow was the contractor for it. And they hired a bunch of Russians to go through those documents, figure out the structure of the Russian UFO program, and did a lot more analysis than I could do just by myself.
And in these documents, they talked about shoot-down attempts, which is something that we'll be hearing more about over the next 15 weeks, I hope. So in Russia, they had this policy at first to engage these things, and they lost pilots.
Yeah, they had 40 different incidents during that study where Russian warplanes chased UFOs. 3 of those cases, the UFOs turned around and shot them down. They disabled the planes, and the planes crashed. 2 of those pilots died. And after the 3rd crash, the Russian Ministry of Defense put out the order, leave them alone. Yeah. They may have, quote, incredible capacities for retaliation. Just leave them alone.
And one last thing about that blew my mind. We did an episode about this, like him going to Russia, the whole thing. They talked about in those documents that they knew how many satellites that we had dedicated to looking for UFOs. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, I met this Russian scientist who had worked on their version of Star Wars. He lived in one of these secret cities. He'd never spoken to any journalist, let alone a Western journalist. And he started telling us about the work that they were doing. He showed me this tabletop model of a laser weapon that he called the weapon of the aliens. But he said he'd been involved in the Russian space program in the earliest days. They had satellites up there that were seeing these things coming in and out of space into Earth's atmosphere and going out. He said, the Americans, I know that you guys had those satellites. You were seeing the same stuff we were. Their intelligence agents got information from the U.S. They knew we were collecting information back then. They know we're collecting it now.